Thank you guys for being here. I especially want to thank my senior senator, Johnny Isakson, for being here, but also Rick Scott, Doug Jones, and Thom Tillis. There are others that have been helping us in this effort to bring disaster relief to people across 12 states, I think it is, from earthquakes in Alaska to fires in California to tornadoes in Alabama to hurricanes in, probably 6 different states in the Southeast. You know, after watching this over the last few years, we've seen the United States federal government step up and do the right thing very quickly in a number of instances. We know in Hurricane Sandy, it was 3 months before that disaster relief started flowing, was approved. Hurricane Katrina was also within weeks after the first initial response was made. And yet here we are, almost 7 months since in the hurricane situation, and even longer than that, than some of these other tragedies. Here we are still trying to work through the political realities here. I think people on both sides of the aisle, and that's represented here today, want to get this done. I can speak specifically about the farmers in my state and in the Southeast, and others can speak to the people who are hurting from their areas as well. But this Hurricane Michael hit exactly in the week, literally the week of harvest for a number of major crops. And it totally destroyed much of the Georgia economic engine called agriculture this past fall. Now, what does that mean? That means today, many farmers in Georgia are specifically coming to the end of their second and some third round of bridge loans through local banks, and the local banks need some kind of encouragement from the federal government to say, hey, we're going to be there for you. It's time to get this done. I want to hear from everybody here, and we'll have a time for a few questions and answers later, but just rest assured that we're not going to give up on this until we get this resolved and get disaster relief flowing to all these people across 12 states that are hurting today. Senator Jones is next, and I welcome him here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Perdue. I'm honored to be here with my colleagues here. This, you know, this really, as Senator Perdue said, ought to be a really bipartisan issue. We got Americans that are hurting. Every one of our communities have been hit with these disasters. Like Senator Perdue and Senator Isakson, my state was hit especially hard right before harvest season with the cotton crop. What was expected to be a bumper crop this year was completely destroyed, gone with the wind, so to speak. And it's been devastating for those folks. And you know, the fact of the matter is, not only have our communities been hit this year, or within the last year, but everybody's communities is going to be hit at some point over the course of their life. And we need to step it up. And it's hard for folks to understand, and it's hard for all of us to understand why we can't get something done. I've said that, you know, sometimes this is just kind of typical of the dysfunction that we see up here all too often here in Washington, D.C. No fault of anybody up here. It is just it is a combination of events. And it really hits home when I went to the Wiregrass pit this past summer. That's the southeast Alabama area, to talk to those farmers and to talk to those folks who really lost their livelihoods. It's not just cotton. There was 30-year-old timber that had to be destroyed that turned into pulpwood, and that's a big loss for those farmers down there. Lee County, where the EF4 tornado killed 24 people. Those folks are still rebuilding. I met with both the EMA folks, but also the victims who are waiting on help. And the folks on the ground down there have done a remarkable job, but it's the victims now that are being victimized again by the inaction that we see here every day. I've visited with all the folks who've lost everything. They want to know what they can do. They're trying to salvage their lives. They're trying to salvage their livelihoods. And in many instances, especially for farmers, we're talking generational. We're not talking about just somebody that's gone into the business and lost it. We're talking about sons who are now having to leave their family farms to do something elsewhere because they cannot depend on the relief that they so desperately need. I've visited folks in the hospitals, everywhere else that are looking for the relief that we need. I want to get back up there, but I want to be able to look these folks in the eyes and tell them that we are trying to do everything we can. Because when they look back at you, they wonder, are you really Are you really? They don't know all the work that these guys have done, all the work that's been done on a bipartisan effort and to get the job done for those. So that's why I'm here today. I'm really pleased to be here with my colleagues, and I want to urge all of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle in both houses of Congress to let's get this done for Americans. Let's get this done for the people that need it so that we can go forward and plan for the future, and maybe we can do the kind of things that will make sure that this doesn't happen again and we can move forward and help these folks. Let's get something done for all the Americans who are hurting with this disaster. So with that, I want to turn it over to Senator Scott from Florida.
Thanks. First, I'm the newbie up here, and it's actually been surprising me that we can't get something done in this amount of time. But I want to thank everybody up here for all their hard work, and I know a lot of them have been working diligently with the House and with appropriations and with the White House to get something done. So I just finished 8 years as governor, and clearly as governor I saw a lot of devastation from different hurricanes and a variety of things, flooding, tornadoes. But following massive storms like Hurricane Michael, all of us, and this, I think everybody up here would say the same thing, we all worked nonstop to get our communities to recover. And I think every one of our states is very resilient, but it's very difficult for a lot of people in our states if they don't get any support from their federal government. There's still a lot to do. One of the biggest issues I'm dealing with right now, yesterday I was at Tyndall Air Force Base. And I met with the base leaders there, and they've got to get our help. I spoke to Secretary Heather Wilson this weekend, and this marks 202 days since Hurricane Michael hit. And we've been working to rebuild Tyndall. They have spent, my understanding, over $400 million not having a bill, thinking there was going to be a bill that happens. As Secretary Wilson explained to me, what's going to happen is starting the 1st of May, which is, I guess, tomorrow, they're going to stop all new projects at Tyndall. Now, that, if you think about it, all of us support our military. We know the importance of our military. And if they don't have the right assets, if they don't have you can't get Tyndall rebuilt, then it impacts the ability for America to defend itself. And on top of what Secretary Wilson said, there will be other states now that because she's had to take this $400 million and spend it, they won't get the money in those states. She in particular brought up what's going to happen in Colorado. I think she said there's $100 million that she was anticipated to spend in Colorado that she can't spend now. So it's not just going to impact what happens at Tyndall, it's going to impact all around this country. Local hospitals, schools, and community facilities are still struggling to recover from the impacts of the storm. We lost, just in the Panama City area, about 25% of the population moved. And our hospitals, everybody has gotten injured. Our agricultural losses or damages are approaching $1.5 billion. We are a lot of people think of Florida as a tourism state, but we have a lot of agriculture, and especially winter crops. But if you go to the panhandle of our state, and it's similar to what's happened with Georgia, if you go a few miles in, it's all forest. And these are 15-plus year crops, and they're just gone because they just the way as Michael went through it just snapped all the trees in half. And so once that happens, they're not, and once they're on the ground, you can't use them anymore. So it impacted them. We had over 100,000 homes destroyed. We've got over $6 billion in property insurance claims. Many families, if you just drive around the Panama City area, go to Mexico Beach, you can't move back yet because they haven't been able to get things fixed. Now, not one of us is going to accept that. We got into public service because we care about people, and we are going to do everything we can to get something done. No one understands why it's taken this long. It doesn't make any sense. Within 10 days of Katrina, Congress passed supplemental disaster relief funding. For Hurricane Ike and Hurricane Gustav, it took 17 days. Andrew, the last Category 5 storm that hit the states, 34 days. Sandy, there was, after all this debate, all these complaints, it took a total of 74 days. It's been 202 days. 202 days, and nothing's happened. Our panhandle communities, our friends in Puerto Rico, the first thing I said on the Senate floor is we've got to make sure we continue to take care of Puerto Rico. We fought and we all agreed that we would get $600 million in for a food nutrition program that Puerto Rico need. But if we want Puerto Rico to rebuild and all of our states to rebuild, we've got to get something done now. It helps families impacted by disasters including earthquake in Alaska, volcanoes in Hawaii, California's horrible wildfires, hurricanes, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Central Northern Mariana Islands. The 2017 hurricanes in Puerto Rico, tornadoes in Alabama and Georgia, flooding in Iowa, Nebraska, and our Midwestern states. So it's not like just a couple of states. We have a lot of states that have gotten impacted. So we all have to realize, we all have to figure out how to work together. We've got to get something done as quickly as we can. We have a bill that can become law. It needs to become law this week. We can't just go week after week after week and nothing gets done. Some of us went to the White House and talked to the White House right before recess. We believe we made some progress then, but we have to have a bill that the president's willing to sign. If we have things in the bill that's going to prevent the president to sign, then we didn't do our job. So there's no reason we can't get this done now. I know all of us are going to work hard. I hope all of our colleagues understand this is really important. And this is, unfortunately, we're going to continue to have disasters in this country, and it's going to impact some of these other states. And while we'll probably be the ones that will always stand up and support this, it makes you mad sometimes that people that supported a disaster in another state now are sitting on their sidelines and saying, I'm not going to help the states that are sitting up here. So now let me turn it over to Senator Isakson from Georgia, and he can talk about some of the impacts it's had there.
I was not in the hurricane, by the way. Thank you. Governor Scott, thank you for what you said. Thank you for what you did. And thanks for the example you set when you were governor of Florida just a couple of years ago when y'all responded to tremendous disasters. But I want to tell you something. We're not here today to talk about an agricultural disaster. We're not here to talk about a hurricane. We're not here to talk about a storm. We're not talking about fire. We're talking about a disastrous failure of the government of the United States of America to respond to the needs of its people. That's a terrible indictment because we're in the Congress. We're part of the bus driving this whole thing. But because of various reasons, some known, some unknown, we've been unable to move now for almost 3/4 of a year. That's 2 cycles in many of the crops that have been damaged that we'll never get back. When you have an agricultural destruction, once that crop's gone, it is gone. And when it takes trees out, you're not talking about a cycle that's a 12-month cycle. You're talking about a cycle that's a 14 to 18-year cycle in terms of maturity of those trees. In Georgia, for example, the pecan market, which we control in the world today, Georgia is one of the largest producers of pecans in the world, is completely gone. A whole year's crop is gone. And the trees that bore those pecans is gone. And they're going to take 15 years to regenerate at the peak they were before. This is a real disaster in real time, but the disaster is no longer what caused us to get together. The disaster is Congress's inability to pass the disaster aid bill. And until we do it, I'm going to be up here like every other member of the Senate that's up here today, fighting to see that we get it done. You're never too late, but you can be too late sometimes for some families, and we already have. In Georgia, some of our farmers are gone. Some have declared bankruptcy. Some have defaulted on their loans, as David Perdue said. It's only a matter of time before others do. So it's time for Congress to rise up and do the right thing at the right time, which was 99 months ago, but today is today. I don't want to leave this Friday without us having done something. I don't want to leave tonight without us having done something. So I call on everybody within the sound of my voice and the sound of our voices up here to recognize we have Americans in hurting, Americans who deserve what they expect from their country. They need a country that can respond to the disasters that we've had. I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of this team, and I want to thank every other member up here, Thom Tillis, Governor Scott, Mr. Jones, David, my partner, David Perdue, and everyone else that's here for all the work they're doing to make this possible. And let's make it happen. Let's make it happen now. Thank you very much. And I think, Tom, are you next? Yeah. Thom Tillis.
Thank you, Chair Isakson. We've in North Carolina, we have had 2 500-year storms over the last 2.5 years. We had Hurricane Matthew that caused about $400 million in agriculture damage, and then Hurricane Florence, which caused about $1.1 billion in hurricane damage. I do agree with Senator Isakson that government's failing the citizens of North Carolina, the citizens of these southeastern states represented here. But I put the fine point on, it's not the government, it's Congress. It's members who should go to the floor and vote for relief and vote for it now. In North Carolina, we have had funds flowing for Matthew and Florence. But the fact of the matter is, at some point, the resources will run out. We've gotten funds, but we haven't gotten those that are considered to be the consensus unmet need. The last thing I'll talk about before we open up questions, though, is to really expand on the point that Senator Scott was making. We have a serious threat to readiness in our military if we do not get funding to these installations that were damaged. In Camp Lejeune alone, we have almost $3.7 billion and damage. We have Marines now working in what Commandant Neller described as expeditionary conditions. That's okay if you're forward deployed. It is not okay if you're a Marine working at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. We have got to free up the money that we need to rebuild our bases and our military installations because it's a direct threat to readiness. We've got to give relief to farmers. That's something that's desperately needed in North Carolina. Like Senator Isakson said, we've missed a harvest cycle and we're missing a planting cycle. And what the consequence of that is, it's not like the farmer will just wait until next spring and start all over. This is when farmers get out of this business. It's a serious, and move on to other endeavors. It's a serious problem that can be solved by Congress simply setting aside every other priority except the priority to have us recover from these storms. And this is not a partisan thing. Storms are not partisan. You see the number of Senate members and congressional members that have been affected by the storms in the Southeast and across the country. We should have more than enough members who will step up, focus solely on this issue, and live to fight another day on any other issue that may be holding up the bill right now. And I fully support everything that we're trying to do this week. And Johnny, I hope we don't go home without a result to take care of these people who need help today. Not next week, not next month, not next year. With that, I'll turn it over to Governor Scott and we'll answer questions.
I think we're just all going to open it up for any questions anybody has.
Senator Scott,
Yes.
I know you just went to Tyndall Air Force Base recently, and there's some photos up here from Panama City. The president announced yesterday, his campaign did, that he's going to have a rally in Panama City Beach next Wednesday. Should he be visiting an area like this, and is it appropriate for him to be going and holding a political rally when this area in Mexico City Beach is still decimated?
Well, my goal is that when he goes there, is that this bill's done, and we have the relief flowing. So I think, there's no reason we can't get this done. David was on the phone, and a bunch of us were in the White House 2 weeks ago, and I thought we made really good progress. And so hopefully by the 8th, which is I think the day he's going, that we'll get it done.
So you think there will be a vote sometime this week?
I hope. I mean, it's ridiculous. 202 days running, and just do we have any pictures of Lejeune? Because I mean, it's unbelievable what happened to Tyndall. It was right there. The eye of the storm went right over it. It was devastating, and this is where. The Air Force does a lot of their training, a lot of their exercises, and they're not going to be as prepared. And I think you'd say the same thing about the Marines.
I think it's not only important that he goes down to the panhandle of Florida, but I would welcome him gladly in Jacksonville, outside of Camp Lejeune, in the fields that are the farmers who need help, and elevate this issue to make the American people recognize that there are a lot of people hurting, and the only reason that we're not providing them relief is because we're not moving this bill forward. So I hope that the president not only goes down there, but he also highlights the fact if we're still in the same posture this time next week, he needs to send the message directly to the American people that Congress needs to act.
It seems like we've been here before, certainly not this long of a wait. I'm wondering, is there something that Congress should be doing differently to prepare for disasters, each and every year?
That's a great question. So 50 years ago, the federal government didn't have the wherewithal, didn't exercise it. And so this is a late developing issue where the federal government, without having a sinking fund or a reserve fund, which, by the way, most states have, my suggestion would be as we do the budget process, we start thinking about allocating, appropriating a reserve fund that would give us some wherewithal to do this in a much more timely fashion. Look at what happens right now. This is caught up in partisan politics. As every person up here has said, Democrat and Republican, this is not a partisan issue, and yet it gets held up. I love what Senator Tillis said. This is a time to take all the other peripheral issues, put them aside, and deal with disaster relief. But if we had a reserve fund, to your question, then it would preclude this entire drama for the last 7 months. Tamar?
We know what the sticking point is. It's aid to Puerto Rico, and you're pretty closely allied with the president, but Democrats have made clear that the $600 million allocated in the bill is not enough. Have you been advising the president to up his offer, and what exactly are you advising him at this point?
To get it done. I mean, and he's advising us to get it done, whatever it takes. But he's also of a mind to take the other peripheral issues off the table, as Senator Tillis said, and let's deal with the issues that deal with this. And I think we'll find tremendous alignment between the Democrats and Republicans. Look, nobody's closer to Puerto Rico than Senator Scott. When he was governor, he was very involved there. I've done a lot of work in my career in Puerto Rico. It has a lot of potential. It was damaged dramatically. But we've already got a lot of money going to Puerto Rico. The president's been more than workable in terms of the nutrition increase. And once we got the deadline coming at us, he immediately said, yes, that's good to go. There are a couple of other issues, and the Democrats have also been workable on some issues. So I honestly think if we take some of these things off the table, we're not far away from getting a bill that we could pass in the Senate, put in a conference, and actually make it become a law of the land and go to the president's desk to get his signature potentially.
Senator, could I just follow up on that, which is, just to be clear, are you encouraging the president at this point to, in fact, accept more money for Puerto Rico beyond the $600 million as the price for getting this bill across the finish line?
Well, right now, the two appropriators, Senator Leahy and Senator Shelby, and their staffs are going back and forth. We've been doing this for the last few weeks, negotiating back and forth about what it's going to take to get this done. The president has basically told us in that last meeting that Senator Scott was referring to, is that basically, guys, go work a deal, and this is what, and we're both, Senator Scott and I are both, among others up here, are saying, look, let's just get this done. In the bigger picture, I think both sides are very close to actually get an agreement on this. So that's been our advice over the last several weeks as we hopefully close in on this thing. And Senator Isakson said it best. I mean, honestly, at this point of criticality, nobody should leave Washington. I mean, forget about a 2-week break. We shouldn't go home on the weekend unless we actually get something done on this, and I think we're close to doing that.
But Senator Scott, did you get a sense that the president was willing to go above the 600?
When I was there 2 weeks ago, I mean, OMB was sitting there, and he said, look, we've got to get something done here. When I spoke to Secretary Wilson yesterday, she said the president committed to the armed services, that he was absolutely committed to making sure all these bases, and we've got others now. We've got Offutt, and we've got some others because of the flooding, and he's absolutely committed to getting this done. But we're not there. I mean, that's all great. I'm a business guy, and so until you get there, you assume nothing's going to happen, because why would it take 202 days?
So is that he won't go above 600?
I think
Is that the sticking point, or
there's something else that's very important to keep in mind. North Carolina, because we had the Hurricane Florence, we were fortunate to get relief to actually prime the pump. Puerto Rico has billions of dollars that are in a pipeline. I met with Ben Carson this morning. They have sufficient dollars to continue the relief effort without any stoppage. We're talking about scenarios here that unless we pass this bill, projects get halted or they never get off the ground. We're in a very different posture. I would even argue between North Carolina, except for agriculture, that we have a lot of our unmet need in the pipeline. So if you look objectively at the critical needs, Puerto Rico, we can't turn our back on the citizens of Puerto Rico.
And we're not.
Yeah.
And we're not. The fact of the matter is, if it really is a sticking point over 200 million, 600 million, or 1.2 billion, we need more money today to fund relief efforts in these states than Puerto Rico will need in months. And so I think at some point, it's understand that there's going to continue to be funding flowing to Puerto Rico, as it has already. And it's being programmed, and there's more available. These folks are just looking for a step in the direction of beginning their relief. And we're trying to provide relief to farmers and military installations that will not be able to go far until we actually get this bill passed.
So just think about it. The immediate issues we're dealing with the military, okay? We're dealing with ag, okay? And then Puerto Rico's immediate issue was the food nutrition program, which we dealt with. And so the way I always look at it in business, you say, what do I need to get done today, and can I get done today? There will be another problem. I mean, this is not going to be the last problem we have, but these are our immediate needs. And, what the president talked about is, he said, it's exactly what Senator Tillis says. We have money that is already allocated for certain issues in our state, but it's not allocated for these issues.
Last question.
Anybody else?
So Senator Jones, do you get a sense that your Democratic leadership is okay with that position then? Stop at 600, let's
No.
come back later?
No, let's be candid. Let's just be really honest here. There's going to have to be a little movement everywhere. We are at a point, and I think David said it best, we are that close. And there's just got to be a little bit of movement. And everybody understands, and I think every day that passes, the importance of this comes up. And I talked to the president too. I wasn't in the meeting, but I did talk to him the week before we left here. And, you know, I think that if people can continue to talk, I will tell you just candidly my view, if we could let Richard Shelby and Patrick Leahy get in a room and everybody agree that whatever they come out with, we'll do, it could get done like that. That's how they operate. So I would encourage that. I would encourage the president. I would encourage Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell to just simply say, Pat, Richard, do it. Get it done, and let's all go home. And I think that they can do it, because I do think that they're that close, and people want to get this happen. They want to get it happen for Puerto Rico, who are American citizens as well, and I think they want to get it done for the farmers. Everybody wants to. It is just this political issue right now, but I think every day that grows, that begins to become a human issue, and that's why we're all up here today.
What's frustrating
let
to
me
me
make
is,
one
why are we
thing very-
talking about an infrastructure bill for $2 trillion when we don't take care of a problem that is an immediate problem? I mean, I hope to have an infrastructure bill while I'm a senator, but golly, we have all these problems right now. Let's solve them.
Let me be very clear on your question, though. The starting point for the Senate was where Senator Isakson and I, after the disaster relief package was pulled out of the appropriating process. That's what makes this different than the others. The others were part of the appropriating process. And so it got tied into things that every senator in every state wanted in the appropriating process. That's why it happened so quickly. This is a little different because it was pulled out. The starting point, though, did not have the $600 incremental investment for nutrition. So the president's already demonstrated his willingness to go forward to try to get a deal done. I think he is flexible right now. I'm not trying to quantify that, but he has shown he's flexible. He's flexible right now. I think the other side has shown the same thing. So I want to reinforce one thing. Time is of the essence here. Everybody up here said it in a different way. The money for Puerto Rico is going to flow over the next decade. This is stuff that right now we're going to lose hundreds and thousands of farmers and the people in California that don't have protection, and earthquakes and all the other places that have had these damages need help now. This is the thing there's nothing flowing to them right now. So thank you guys. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.